Hey guys, this is Low Roll Legend. Today I wanted to rank the Zelda games in a tier list. I'm going to use my experiences to explain why each game is ranked where it is at. We all have our favorite Zelda games, and typically the list varies greatly from person to person. My favorite list is no different. My tier list of Zelda games is just that, my list. It will not be identical to yours. Our favorite games are not only depicted by how good a game is, we choose these based on nostalgia, age, preferences, and many other factors. I'm only saying this to let you know that in your eyes this list will not be perfect, because it's not your list. Hopefully you understand why I ranked each game where I did, and if you disagree, please let me know in the comments below. Zelda is among the highest critically acclaimed game franchises of all time. Even the lowest games on this list are still considered masterpieces. The lowest tier is labeled F, but that is not indicative of how good the game is. That just means that these are the worst of the Zelda games in my opinion. I don't think any of these games are bad. In fact, I would choose the lowest ranked games on this list to almost any other franchise. Also, I will try to stay away from spoilers in this video. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get started. First up, the game that would be in last place for me, The Legend of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. This is one of the most unique games in the Zelda series, introducing the side-scrolling and Metroidvania-style gameplay, which hasn't been replicated much since the start of the Zelda series. The game is fun and has some great parts to it, including the graphics on the side-scrolling portion, which were great for the NES console. This is also one of the more traditional style RPG games, with experience points, magic casting, and leveling up. And the towns are very well recognized for an NES game. But this game loses a lot of what made the original game magical in the first place. The overworld exploring isn't very enjoyable. Having random encounters, unlike the first game, makes the adventure aspect of the game less fun. And don't even get me started on having to spawn from the beginning every time you die. The Adventure of Link is a fun game overall, but it is dead last on this list. The next two games in the F category, The Legend of Zelda: Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. It's a toss-up between these two on which is better. I would probably put Phantom Hourglass a little higher for being more fresh, but overall they are very similar. The stylus controls on the DS take away from the games more than they give. As I played through these games, it was always in my mind that not having to use the stylus would be a better option. However, the stylus does add some fun parts to these games. The boomerang is probably more enjoyable in these games than in any other Zelda games. Being able to control where they go is a fresh aspect to using them, and being able to draw on your map is another great addition. I haven't played these games in full in years, so when I revisit them, they may move up a little higher on this list. Now to start off our D tier, The Legend of Zelda: Four Swords. This game was very hindered behind the multiplayer-only aspect. Zelda games work best as an exploration game where you can do as you will at a time frame you wish. You don't get this freedom quite as much in Four Swords. The multiplayer, however, is a really fun and fresh take on the Zelda series. The worst part of this game was that if you didn't have other people to play with, you couldn't play. And a lot of times it's not easy to get a group of people together to play the same game at the same time. Next is, you guessed it, Four Swords Adventures. This game improves on what Four Swords struggle with. You can play on your own, but that takes away from the gameplay. The gameplay is competitive and cooperative, which makes you want to compete with your friends to do the best. This is the best version of a multiplayer Zelda game. The game looks great for its time as well. The game has a cartoon aesthetic that still feels like a 2D Zelda. Overall, Four Swords Adventure is one of the more unique Zelda games with gameplay that hasn't been replicated since. I have not played either Four Sword games since release, largely due to accessibility with other people, so my thoughts on these games are dated. I would love to see these games added to the online Switch system. Being able to play these on a modern system with people around the world, take my money please. Here is where the list will get very divisive. Alright, get the pitchforks out. The original Legend of Zelda on the NES. The game that started it all. The game that made exploring and adventure games what they are today. Starting you off in the middle of nowhere with no direction, every decision is up to you. The map felt huge and you could spend hours getting lost in this game. But the game has shown its age. There is no real story to this game, the combat is outdated, and the items are mostly useless outside of one use within a dungeon. The dungeons are largely copy and pasted. For the time this game came out in, it was revolutionary, but comparing it to more recent Zelda games, even 2D ones, shows that this game hasn't gotten better with age. The last game in the C tier is Twilight Princess. Some people rank this as their favorite Zelda game. Nostalgia got the best of me with this one. When it came out a few years ago, I loved it. It was an HD version to the Nintendo 64 games that we all fell in love with. The real-life aesthetics were mesmerizing. and it was exactly what we wanted after the Windwaker's cel-shaded graphics. But going back and playing it recently this year, the game is not what I remembered. The graphics have aged poorly in comparison to its GameCube counterpart, the Windwaker. The HD version on the Wii U helps a little bit, but this game still seems a little bit too gritty. The Twilight realm is a bit off-putting, and Wolf Link sections are quite boring. You spend a good portion just looking at the ground following a singular path. And Wolf Link combat system was very dry. It was the exact opposite of what you want out of a combat system. The game is not all bad though. The story really opens up after its first few hours. Ganondorf and Zelda are great. Midna might be the best sidekick in any Zelda game, and the boss battles were some of the best of any game. And some of the dungeons are still very well crafted to this day. Overall, the game is great, but in comparison to the games in front of it, Twilight Princess falls a bit short. Now we move into the games that I have to nitpick to find negatives. These games are revolutionary and amongst the greatest games ever created. The B tier starts with the games that are timeless, games that I visit frequently and enjoy just as much as when I first picked them up. The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, maybe my favorite looking Game Boy game of all time. Capcom took a bold risk with Zelda games, changing up some of the formula that we've grown to expect, but they pulled it off with Minish Cap. The story's short, but still enjoyable. The dungeon designs are good, the shrinking aspect is fine, although sometimes it does feel tacked on and an unnecessary barrier to the game. Eslo's a funny sidekick, and the boss fights feel great for a Game Boy game. Using the Minish size to fight bosses is a refreshing take, and Vaati is a great villain. The towns are live and immersive, although one knock is that the kinstones become a drag over time. Overall, it's a beautiful version of the 2D Zelda formula that has stood the test of time very well. Next we have the very first game in the series canonically, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, probably the best story of any Zelda game. The love between Link and Zelda feels real, and the villains are amazing. The game's graphics look very well mixed with Windwaker and Twilight Princess and found a good balance, and the music is amazing. This is the first time to feature an orchestrated soundtrack, and you can tell. Fi is an original take on a sidekick. Sure, sometimes she gets a little annoying, as all sidekicks do, but Fi overall is a strong plus to the game. Demise is an amazing antagonist. His fire hair and his large frame makes him a truly threatening villain. The motion controls are not perfect. At times, what you're trying to do will not work, and you will go the opposite way. But most of the time, it's fun to be put in Link's shoes and actually wield the sword. Also, I may be nitpicking here, but changing Link to right-handed in this game bothered me. I understand why they did it. For most people, this is a plus. But as a left-handed person myself, it would have been nice to have a real left-handed mode, where Link uses his left hand in the game. Moving the Wiimote with your left hand and watching Link move his right hand was always a little off. Overall, this game is an amazing game, and I would pray that we get this game ported to the Switch or an HD version. Please, Nintendo, give us what we want. Last in the B tier are the Oracle games, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. I only group these together because I enjoy them almost equally. They were released together and have a similar feel, but they are different games. The gameplay mechanics are very different between the two though. One is based around actions and the other one is more based around puzzle solving. The items in this game are great and the dungeons are well thought out. The story is laid out to you in the games very early and has a little bit of too much text to read. By the time you finally get towards the end of the beginning text, you lose a little bit of interest. The visuals have not aged well either. Neither has the soundtracks. The gameplay is still top notch. Overall, these games are near perfect 2D Zeldas. I would choose Ages a little higher, but you can't go wrong with either. Now we have the A tier games, the pinnacle of adventure gaming. All of these games have scores over 90 on Metacritic. It was very hard to choose where to put these games in what order. I wanted to keep the S tier limited to 3 games, but it was hard to sort which game went where. I'm confident in where I rank these games at the moment, but that could also change with time. First up in A tier, The Legend of Zelda A Link Between Worlds, the namesake of this channel. A Link Between Worlds brought back the old school Zelda formula that had been missing for quite some time, but it didn't skip a beat. The spiritual successor to A Link to the Past, this game takes what made the original so good, but didn't make it feel like a carbon copy. The music will take you back to the first time you picked up a Zelda game. The characters are fresh, and the world is the Hyrule we know it, but adds Lorule, a brand new take on the mirror world we've seen before. This is the first time we've seen counterparts to Link and Zelda though. Ravio and Hilda are fun, and they make you want to know more about them. Ravio is one of my favorite characters to ever get added to Zelda. He's cowardice, but he seems innocent enough to forgive him. I plan to make a video on everything that makes Ravio so good. The dungeons are great in this game, and the puzzles are some of the best we've seen. The game gives you a wall merge mechanic that makes the overworld one big puzzle. You use the wall mechanic to travel between high roll and low roll. However, there are some areas blocked off, and the only way to gain access is to travel from world to world. This makes traversing very fun, and you always have to be aware of your surroundings. I could go on for days about why I love this game. The only real gripe I have is that the way you look at Link as you control him. You see the top of his head, making you feel less immersed into the gameplay. That's it. Everything else is a plus. The Link Between Worlds is near perfect. Now we have The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. This is maybe the most quirky game in the series. The Easter eggs in this game are amazing. From seeing Yoshi to having everyone in the game call you a thief, you'll never stop being surprised. The story's a dark tale as well. Without going into any spoilers, the game is about consequences and having to choose between two hard decisions. The game isn't very long, but that doesn't take away from the story or gameplay. The overworld is fresh, and it's nice not to be in Hyrule at all for a change. The dungeon designs and the boss fights are also very well done. What Link's Awakening leaves you with is a solid game from front to back without many flaws. The only frustrating part of this game is the limited button layout. Having to switch between items constantly gets old after a while. However, we are finally getting this game remade with HD graphics and a fixed button layout on the Switch. I have not been this excited for a game in a long time. The next game is the hardest place for me. Depending on the day, this game could have even been higher. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. The darkest game in the series is also one of the best in the series. The story alone puts the game in the upper echelon. It's a very sad story with real emotions injected into it. Majora's Mask spends more time on the characters and their problems than any other Zelda game. Along with that story is some of the most in-depth and most interesting side quests in any Zelda game. Watching people of Clocktown slowly go mad as they believe they're going to die feels very real. The mask mechanic presents you with many different ways to play the game, including rolling around, floating around as a Deku Scrub, or even swimming like a fish. The only gripe I have with this game is with the 3-day cycle. Some of the game becomes repetitive. And even having a timer at the bottom of the screen makes you feel rushed. The reason most of us love Zelda is because of that freedom of being able to explore and learn the world you're living in. Having a timer tick at the bottom loses that magic. Overall, Majora's Mask is the story I'm most inspired by, and I want to see revisited in a future Zelda game. The Legend of Zelda Windwaker. Boy, do I love this game. It's beautiful, it's fun, it's original, it's nearly perfect. The cel-shaded graphics look stunning and have aged better than any game I can think of. The combat system in this game holds up to this day, and the dungeons are perfect. I've seen other videos that this game doesn't have many dungeons, but I disagree. You have 7 main dungeons, and then 4 mini dungeons. There's a perfect balance of overworld exploring and dungeon crawling in this game. Windfall Island feels very real and alive, with tons of things to do and reasons to go back through the course of the game. The game only slows down during the Triforce quest. You spend a good portion looking around at the overworld and being confused. For a few hours, it will take you totally out of the gameplay and also of the story. Also, there's a portion where you have to find someone singing, and there's no hint to where to find them at. You have to look around and just hope you stumble upon them. Other than the lull towards the end of the game, it's perfect. The HD remake only improved on this game, and I play it at least once a year. We are finally down to the top 3, the S tier. I would put these games up against any games in history, and they will hold up well. First up, the best 2D game ever made, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This game introduced most of what we know as Zelda today. The Master Sword, traveling between worlds, the hook shot, the spin attack, and many other mainstays. What sets this game apart is the balance it has. Everything is perfectly crafted to make a perfect game. The bold lines, the bright colors of the graphics look stunning to this day. The dungeons, the puzzles, the combat system are all perfectly crafted. The boss battles are all very challenging, but a fun and rewarding experience. The game is filled with personality. Link, for the first time, is a fully fleshed out character, and his journey through Hyrule feels very real. This game has stood the test of time better than any game. If you play this game today, it feels like a true classic. 3 years ago, this game would have been my #1 game. It was for a long time my favorite game of all time. From the first time I picked it up in 1998, I've been in love ever since. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. What can I say about this game that hasn't already been said? It's truly stunning. From the moment you turn on the game and hear that title theme, the game perfectly balances childhood wonder to the burden of saving the world. You start as a young boy with no cares, which the tone perfectly sets up. The game eases you into a heavy story about saving Hyrule and rescuing Princess Zelda. Once you become an adult and see Hyrule Castle for the first time, you'll truly feel the burden that has been laid on Hyrule. Ganondorf is a perfect villain as well. He's menacing, intimidating, and he's not easy to beat. Overall, this game is timeless. It took all the aspects of making a great game and perfected them. The story, the gameplay, the world building, all of it. This game is the only game with a 99 or above on Metacritic. Ocarina of Time is a timeless masterpiece that will forever be considered one of the greatest games of all time. But there's one game left, the game that changed it all, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Around the time that Windwaker HD had came out, it looked like Zelda's best days were behind it. Skyward Sword was a great new game, but in comparison to the previous titles, it wasn't quite as good. Then we got several years in a row with only spin-offs and HD ports. The formula had gotten a little stale. It felt like the game I had loved so much was on its decline. Then, Breath of the Wild happened. It totally reinvented Zelda. The aesthetic was new, the world was fresh, the gameplay was totally different. All of these changes were a plus. Breath of the Wild took everything that made classic Zelda good and made it better. Never have I spent so much time in a game just exploring the world and spending hours making the story my own. As soon as you finish the opening walkthrough, you can go in any direction and start your adventure. The combat system was also heavily upgraded. You could use tons of different weapons. There are 100 different ways to approach defeating enemies. The gameplay is the best I've ever played. Essentially, the game is perfect to me. I've played this game in its completion several times now. I never thought I would like a game as much as I like Ocarina of Time, but I was wrong. Breath of the Wild revigorized my love for gaming and my love for Zelda. I wouldn't be making this video right here today if it wasn't for this game. Now, we just have to wait for the sequel. So there you have it, my official tier list of Zelda games. I plan on replaying all of these games and taking an in-depth look at all of them. Who knows? This list could look totally different a year from now. I'll be posting a reflection video on all of these Zelda games, including the spin-offs, so I hope you check them out when I do. Thanks for watching the video today, guys. Keep the legend going.